Namaste, I am Manjula. Welcome to Manjula's Kitchen. Today I have my niece Amita Garg who will demonstrate the new recipe.
So today I'm going to be making for you homemade bread with very little time and very little ingredients. You can get professional results at home with just a little advanced preparation. So this recipe is going to make 1 loaf, and we will need 3 cups of all-purpose flour, maida or plain flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, ½ teaspoon of active dry yeast, and 1½ cups of warm water. Now we're ready to start making the dough. You're going to put in the salt and sprinkle the yeast, and we want to mix it evenly throughout the flour. So we're going to get a whisk or a fork and stir it like so. So once it's even, you can make a well in the center and start putting your water. Once you have it a little moist, take a fork and start gently mixing it. You want to make sure not to knead the dough, so you want to treat it very gently. So start adding a little more water and mix it. This way it's evenly distributed throughout the flour. And just start adding some more around the edges here. Again, treating it very gently. It's pretty moist. You can take your fingers and make sure they're oiled so it doesn't stick to your hands, and just gently start folding it. We're just trying to make all the flour moist, and at the end we want to wind up with a shaggy dough. So we don't want it too wet or too dry. And mainly we want to make sure that there's no dry flour left on the bottom of the bowl. So again, just take your fingers in the edges and scrape it. So it looks like now we're kind of getting rid of the dry flour on the bottom. And I think we're winding up with a shaggy piece of dough here. And we're done mixing our dough. So now we want to leave it to rise overnight. This is the best part of this type of bread. There's no kneading, not a lot of work. It's just going to do its thing overnight, and we're going to have fresh bread in the morning. When your dough is done right there, you want to cover it with a plastic wrap and just leave it in a room temperature place. And just leave it overnight, or leave it for 10 hours. So you want to make sure your bowl is big enough to accommodate the dough. It's going to rise double overnight. Here's the dough, which we've left to rise for 10 hours. So we're going to take a look. You see how the water kind of absorbed more into the flour. So now we're going to go ahead and put it into our loaf pan. So we're using here a loaf pan that's 4.5 by 8.5, but you can use any size that you have at home. So we're going to grease it a little bit so it doesn't stick to the pan when we take it out. And we're just going to be sure not to tear the dough. So I'm just going to carefully scrape it from the edge of the pan here. And we can just put it directly into the loaf pan. Perfect. So once it's in the loaf pan, we're just going to slightly stretch it out to match the shape here. So we don't have to worry too much about how it's shaped. It's gonna look good when we get it out. And see how we're filling it about 1/2 to 2/3. So you want to make sure to fill it maximum 2/3, because when it bakes, it's going to rise in the oven. So we're done putting in the loaf pan, and to shape it a little more, we're going to cover it back with a plastic wrap and just let it rest for 10 more minutes. Our dough has been resting in this loaf pan for about 10 minutes, so you see the texture is nice and smooth and it's taken on the shape of the loaf pan. So we're going to get ready to put it into our oven here. and make sure you're wearing your oven mitts. So this oven has been preheating to 450 degrees. Before I preheated it, I went ahead and placed a baking pan on the bottom of the oven. And the reason we're doing that is our secret to our crispy, crunchy crust. And we're going to be recreating a professional steam injection oven. So what we're going to do is we have our hot baking pan on the bottom here, and we're going to be working really quickly, and there's going to be a lot of steam, but don't worry, it's all good. I've taken 2 cups of water, and I'm going to be pouring it on the bottom. There's steam there, and I'm placing my oven in there. And you see it's creating a nice steamy environment. What's going to happen is it's going to steam first and then bake to create that nice artisan bread texture. So we've set the oven to 450 degrees, and we're going to be setting the timer for 35 minutes. It's been 35 minutes, and before we open the oven door, we want to make sure to open the oven light and check the color of our crust. So I've turned on the oven light here, and I'm checking the color. It looks like a nice dark brown. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it off and then open. And it smells wonderful, very tempting. White bread here. So now we've taken the bread out of the oven, and we're going to make sure to let it continue to cool. So I know it's very tempting, it smells very yummy, but we don't want to cut it open right away. So I'm going to just pop the loaf out of the pan here and set it on my cooling rack. And I don't want to touch it until it reaches room temperature.
So bread is looking good, crusty, and I think it's time I want to try it. And Amita, slice it.
So we're going to slice our bread here. It has a nice crackle. And as you see, it has a crunchy crust and a soft inside. Now there's a million different ways to make bread. You can try making it with bread flour that you find in the store. The difference between all-purpose and bread flour is that bread flour has a higher gluten content. With that, you're going to get a higher rise and more open holes here, but this is also delicious. So you can go ahead and enjoy your bread any way that you like. You can put some butter and jam on it and enjoy.
Enjoy. Thank you. Till we meet again, check out more recipes on manjulaskitchen.com.